It's wonderful to be here, and I have a huge honor in introducing this next section. And the next section I get to introduce is something that is very, very near and dear to my heart. It's Move the Dial stories. And a little bit about me, I'm Candice, Candice Faktor, and I run Faktory Ventures, a seed stage investment firm that really invests in globally ambitious entrepreneurs who are using exponential technologies to change the world. And I feel incredibly privileged to do what I do. I've known Jody, founder of Move the Dial, for a very, very long time. We went to school together. And when Jody told me her vision, I was blown away. I was like, wow, that's really big. And in some ways, I was like, really? You can do that? And I was so inspired by Jody. And we went to the first event, and there were lots of panels at this event, and it was super interesting. And I said to her, you know, Jody, the thing for me that has really moved the dial in my life are stories. Are stories of people who are really, really successful, learning how the hell did they get there? Like, what is it that they did in their lives that I haven't done or that I could do? What is it that gave them the courage or the inspiration or the desperation to become the people who they are? And so I said, you know, Jody, why don't we create Move the Dial stories? Not a polished version of stories, not the one that you may see in the media, but the really authentic and vulnerable and real versions of people sharing their stories. Because you see, we all have this image that we put out there, right? I'm this venture investor and my life has been dandy ever since I, started. Well, it hasn't. It's a roller coaster full of ups and many, many downs. And when we share from a place of vulnerability and honesty, we give people the chance to change their lives. And so we hosted our first stories event literally a year ago, and we shared real stories. And so tonight, I would love the chance to share my story. But the reality is, and I've been told this, there isn't enough time. But a couple things I will say. My story is that of many, many people who live in the city. I am an immigrant. I left a very complicated country, South Africa, and a very privileged life for a better life. One where we had to leave everything behind and start afresh. I remember in the early days really having nothing and having immigrant parents who worked really, really hard to give me a better life. I worked hard, I was really curious, but I've had many ups and downs since that point. I've been exposed to so many interesting people and so many interesting stories. And the last role that I had before Faktory Ventures was a platform that was only about stories. I was the GM and head of business for a wonderful platform called Wattpad, which was a community of 75 million people sharing their stories. So you understand how much I believe in the power of stories. And so it's really an honor to be here introducing this next segment, and we have stories of some phenomenal women. Lisson, the president of FedEx Canada, Eguono, Omotayo, the director of digital strategy of CIBC, Tiffany, Pham, the founder and CEO of Mogul, and Kris, a digital journalist at AJ+. And what I really hope for you is that when you listen to these people's stories, you take a minute to think about what can you do differently now that you know their journey? How is your journey going to change? For me, it was because of inspiring people that I learned it's okay to take certain risks. Fear is a real paralyzer for people, and the only way we can get past that fear is when we hear people's journeys and we realize it's okay to go outside our comfort zones, when we're optimistic about what we can do, when we're curious about the world and other people, when we're courageous and we triumph over fear, when we take responsibility for our actions, and when we take incremental steps, just starting, just doing one small thing, our lives really change. So thank you, Jody, for putting Move the Dial together so everybody here can be inspired. And without further ado, I will welcome Lisa Lisson. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. So excited to be here. I'm Tiffany, Pham, founder and CEO of Mogul, and just so honored to be before such an incredible audience, and just so excited to share with you my story and the journey that I undertook to start Mogul. But most importantly, the lessons I learned and all the mistakes I made along the way, because I made so many of them. And I'm excited to share all this with you because I'm excited for you to then learn from all these lessons and mistakes and immediately apply it to yourselves personally, professionally, and immediately become moguls yourselves right away today. So my story all begins initially with my family, because my family was such an amazing inspiration to me. My great uncle, my father, but most of all my grandmother, because my grandmother was this amazing maverick of her time. She ran companies across Asia. She ran businesses. She ran newspapers, providing others in need with opportunities and information. And I wanted to be just like her growing up, my grandmother. I mean, she was amazing. She was one of the first women to drive a car in Vietnam. At that time, can you imagine? Such an amazing woman. So I grew up in Paris, France initially. And then when I was just 10 years old, living this idyllic childhood in Paris, all of a sudden my parents started to fall more in love with America. They watched black and white movies, and over again, all these classic films inspired them to think that maybe we should move there to America. And so at age 10, out of nowhere, I moved from Paris, France, to Plano, Texas. Anyone here from Plano? Maybe? No hands. And that's okay. It was awesome, though. I loved the city, but it was definitely a struggle because I remember not knowing how to speak English whatsoever at age 10. So literally, I would watch shows like Friends and I Love Lucy and listen to the radio. This woman named Delilah on KBIL, she plays love songs. I don't know if you have listened to this radio station before, but that's how I learned how to speak English. And I could see for myself how powerful media could be for learning and education. And I never forgot that feeling and experience. But my whole entire life changed truly when I was 14 years old. That's when the rest of my life was determined forever after. And that was because when I was 14, the most horrific, the saddest day of my life occurred at that time. My grandmother, my biggest role model in life, she passed away. And that day that she passed away, I made a promise to her that I was going to do everything I could to follow in her footsteps. And I was going to dedicate my life towards providing others in need with opportunities and information, just like her. No matter how hard or challenging, I was going to spend every waking moment working towards that goal and mission too. No matter how little sleep, no matter how hard, I was going to do this too. So ever since I was 14, that's all I've ever worked towards. And so at age 16, I didn't have the funds to go to visit college or even attend college. But I remember watching this TV show at the time. Has anyone seen Gilmore Girls? Oh, okay, a lot of us. In the show, so you're familiar, this character, Rory Gilmore, goes off to college, to Yale, and she runs the school newspaper, just like my grandmother. So even though I didn't have the funds to go visit college or even attend, I thought, well, this was my one little picture of what it could be like, and there I could be like my grandmother. So I wrote them a letter and asked if they would just give me the chance. I knew I could do this one day. I knew I could create this company just like my grandmother, providing others in need with opportunities and information, just like her. And then they let me in on scholarship. And so the first time I ever stepped foot on Yale campus was the first time I ever saw what a college looked like. And that first entire year, I was so excited to make an impact. But me, being the introvert, the shy girl, I never spoke up. I only went from my bedroom to the class, back to the bedroom. Wow, what an impact I made, right? Just like my grandmother. So, beginning of sophomore year, second year, promised myself, I could never live the rest of my life looking back upon a moment and regretting it. So no matter what, I was going to be more like my grandmother. Now I was going to put my foot forward and I was going to find an opportunity to be like her on campus no matter what. And so I came back and all of a sudden joined the school newspaper, and only to find that it was near bankruptcy and was in significant debt and was going to fold if we didn't do something about it. So all of a sudden, came back, came up with a plan, and ended up working through my worst nightmare, which was to essentially roll up my sleeves, the shy girl, the introvert, and start selling door to door to door. And started trying to convince everybody around campus to please advertise in the school newspaper, or else it was going to fold. And more I would share the story of why I was so passionate about why they had to. And all of a sudden, we went from bankruptcy to record profitability. And that became one of the most transformative experiences of my life. So I share this story because sometimes, you may be in a moment where you don't want to put your foot forward, you don't want to speak up, you don't want to be sharing your ideas in a conversation, you don't necessarily feel the courage or the confidence, but you don't want to look back on that moment and regret it. That's the one thing I had when I didn't have courage and confidence. I had this desire to never look back on a moment and regret it. And so I encourage you to always remember that. Always live in the present. Never regret a moment. Put your foot forward, start to speak up. Anyways, so then I ended up leading the school newspaper, just like Rory, just like my grandmother. And then at that time, I started watching another movie, Legally Blonde. Anyone seen it? And in the movie, she goes off to grad school, to Harvard. So I thought, okay, I don't have the funds to go to grad school, but that was my one picture of what it looked like. So I applied to Harvard Business School. And I wrote them a letter if they would just give me the chance. I knew I could do this one day. And all of a sudden, ended up at Harvard Business School on scholarship and became their youngest student there. Then ended up working for one of the presidents of BBC, who actually years later is on our board at Mogul, as I started having more and more confidence, reaching out to role models. She was a big role model of mine. Then the president of HBO, and then the president of CBS, one of the presidents there, whereby I became one of the youngest executives at CBS, overseeing TV, radio stations, websites, mobile properties, me, the shy girl, all the way to the youngest executive at CBS. It was amazing. I loved the opportunity. It was amazing to learn about all these media properties and the ways in which to grow users and monetization across different types of media, TV, radio, websites, mobile properties. But I knew to fulfill this promise to my grandmother, I needed to know many more facets of a company inside and out. I needed not only to know strategy, business development, which was what I was learning at CBS, but I also needed to know marketing and branding, content creation and distribution, and then ultimately product and technology, and so many more things. So I took on what is popularly known now, but wasn't really known so much at the time, as a side hustle. I took on 2 side jobs at night, which I won't kid you, was really difficult. I barely slept, but it all worked out because of the various time zones, which is that ultimately during the day I would work in New York at CBS. At night I took on 2 side jobs again, the second one being with the Vice Mayor of Beijing, whereby he and I would co-create a venture together, investing Beijing resources into the US talent, and ultimately I became global head of marketing of this initiative. And then the third job I took on at nights was producing feature films and documentaries with incredible A-list talent in Hollywood, featuring incredible people that I admire so much, from Patricia Arquette to more. And I became the producer behind the first North American feature film to ever feature a man with Down syndrome in the lead role, for example, highlighting new voices into the industry, new talent into the pool. So I had all 3 jobs at once, when all of a sudden I remember waking up, and out of nowhere, 6 a.m., I jumped out of bed because my phone had exploded with so many emails from all around the world, and all these young girls from all around the world had emailed me saying that they had read about my 3 jobs that morning, because by chance Forbes had put me on one of their first 30 under 30 lists, and no one knew what it was, but they had put my email address on there. And so I got so many emails from all around the world, and every single one was telling me that they needed those 3 jobs too. They wondered how they could get these same opportunities, interviews, promotions. And me being me, I would start to write back to every single letter. And then I think word got around that if you wrote this girl in America, then you would get back this 3-page essay, because then I started getting back so many letters, so many hundreds of letters, and that's when it occurred to me, what if we had a platform like this out there? What if we had a platform whereby millions of us could share our obstacles and challenges and struggles, real emotions, raw conversations? Not the sizzle reel, the highlights we were seeing everywhere else, but really being real with one another. And from that would emerge real ideas and insights and opportunities. And then when I looked around, it made sense, because I realized that other information platforms like this kind of existed out there, but were largely male millennials. For example, Reddit. Anyone familiar here with Reddit? A lot of hands. You should be. I mean, it's one of the top 7 sites in the world, top 4 in the US. Largely male millennials, over 90% at the time. And Wikipedia, too. Who here uses Wikipedia? Yeah, almost all hands. 91% male users at the time, probably still to this day. 91% male editors, users. So what I thought was gender neutral is largely males, men's perspectives, voices. So anyways, came up with the idea for Mogul as a way whereby we could bring all voices together. Why not all? So that everyone could be the best versions of themselves, a Mogul. And ultimately, at that time, I didn't have millions of dollars to hire a team of engineers, but I thought the one final thing I could do to help all these young women's lives that were contacting me, following me online, was to maybe build this myself. I realized I didn't have, again, the funds to create something necessarily by hiring others, but I had myself, and maybe I could teach myself how to code and build this myself. So every single day I'd work with one of the presidents of CBS, Vice Mayor of Beijing, and then Patricia, etc. And then at nights at 3 a.m., I'd be done with everything, and I would clear the kitchen table and teach myself Ruby on Rails. And it was super hard at the beginning. I literally couldn't get through the first chapter, which was just how to download the right software. It took me a whole month to get through it. I won't kid you. But I finally got through the remaining 9 chapters. After a week and a half, had built the first version of Mogul, which was super ugly at the beginning, but it was something I created with my own 2 hands, and I couldn't believe it. It was really amazing, building with my own 2 hands. And then I sent it out to the thousands of young women following me online. We ended up exploding to 1 million women within our first week, becoming the fastest growing platform for women. Fast forward to today, now Mogul is one of the largest female millennial platforms worldwide, ultimately backed by incredible, incredible innovators from Hearst to founders of Comcast, Match.com, heads of MTV, NPR, Fortune, etc. So many incredible people who believe us to be the next-gen technology media for girls and women worldwide. And ultimately, we are globally accessed every single day by all 196 countries and 35,000 cities around the world, such that because of our scale and reach, we can now be in a unique position to impact women's lives in a way that's never been done before. But why is this all important? I just leave you with 3 things. First, 3 lessons that I learned along the way that I hope you apply to yourselves today. First, rapidly prototype and iterate towards perfection over time. Remember at the beginning, I told you I came up with the idea for Mogul, and then I started to actually teach myself how to code so I could build it myself. And it was so ugly at the beginning, but I didn't care. So for yourself, if you have an idea, put pen to paper, just get started. Don't worry that it's not perfect at the beginning. It won't be, but you'll continue to iterate upon it, and it will get there over time. And I say this because I know it's common sense, but so many of my best girlfriends tell me that they have this incredible idea, but they have themselves at such a high standard, they hold themselves at such a high place that they just can't allow anyone else to see that imperfection, and they just never get started. And it's a shame, because it was a really good idea. So if you have your idea, get started, go for it. And you'll hear some no's along the way, and that's okay. I heard many no's along the way, but I always remembered this, that I loved declines, I loved rejection, I loved failing, because I always worked way harder when I did. And that anyways, a no is a not right now that will turn into a yes. That was my favorite phrase that I always said to myself, and that we now say all throughout Mogul. A no is a not right now that will turn into a yes. And it always happens with all your hard work and passion and dedication. It always does. Second, collaborate to accelerate. Reach out to your 50 role models today. At the beginning, I knew nobody in the tech industry, so I jumped in and started to reach out right away to role models. And all of a sudden, started to meet with all these incredible people, reaching out to them, emailing them, and as you reach out to your 50 role models, again, you may not hear from them, and it'll be okay, because out of those 50, 10 might actually reply, but 2 will become incredible opportunities, and 1 will change your life. That's how I got my side jobs with the Vice Mayor of Beijing, with A-list talent in Hollywood, reaching out to incredible people, 10 becoming opportunities, 2 becoming incredible projects I took on, and 1 changing my life. And then finally, all throughout this, always follow your gut, follow your instinct, but remember to, throughout, be kind, authentic, and generous. Those are our 3 values at Mogul. Always be giving and giving and giving, because that's the energy you're giving off, and that's the energy you're getting back. And after all, if I hadn't been giving and giving and giving since the very beginning to all those young girls, I wouldn't have the honor of being here with you today. Thank you. And now please help me welcome Lisson.
Well, good evening, everyone. Some good news. You're in the home stretch, number 1, and number 2. I'm only going to be 7 minutes. I'm the president of FedEx Canada, so I will be on time. How's that? Because we're never late, people. We're never late. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. They say that what doesn't, kill you makes you stronger. And to me, there's a certain X factor in there that I call resilience, okay? And what resilience is our ability to bounce back from a life force stronger than when we started. But here's the good news. The good news is what I learned about resilience on my journey that I'm going to share with you is that I always thought these people that, were so successful and this and that and defied the odds, they must have been born with that. No, I'm here to tell you today that resilience is not something that you have to be born with. It's something that you can learn. So listen to this. Our ability to sink or swim in life, okay, through whatever life forces we face, truly depends on our willingness to learn. And the choice is ours. Now, let me share you quickly about my story. I met my high school husband, grade 9. We were like peanut butter and jelly. We've been together all through high school, all through university, working our way up in our career. I'm a VP of FedEx at the time, and he was also a vice president. And we had just come back from a vacation up north, and we had 4 kids, 9, 7, 5, and 3. In the middle of the night, I hear a thump. For those of us that are moms, we have bionic hearing. I find my husband on the floor. He had suffered a massive heart attack. We were 38 years old. So we called 911, they did CPR, they take him to our local hospital, and I find out that they tell me he suffered a massive heart attack. And I have a team of doctors looking at me saying, you need to let him go because we don't think he's going to have a meaningful life. And I asked one very important question to these doctors. Is he brain dead? No. Is there a flicker? Yes. I said, you hook him up to everything that you possibly can because he's 38 years old, he's the love of my life, and I need to know if I'm going to get my miracle. Because do miracles happen in this hospital? Of course, miracles happen every day. And I need to know if I'm going to get mine. So for the next 2 years, he was in a vegetative state. I brought him home every Sunday with the kids. It wasn't the normal I envisioned, but it was my new normal now that I had to face. And after 2 years of researching and trying everything I possibly could to bring him back, and I'm a very optimistic person, and I would tell people, he's coming back, I had to realize that being optimistic has its limits when things are not meant to be. So I had to realize at the end of those 2 years, it was time to let him go. And it was a difficult decision, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And this truly set me on my path to finding resilience. It is my sweet mommy who's sitting over there right now, Susie Federchuk, the rock in my life. She set me on my path to resilience because here's what she said. Baby, life is not about what happens to you. It's about what you choose to do with what happens. So when you're dealing with a life force, remember you have a choice. Your choice is how you respond. So I realized at this moment I had a choice how I was going to respond. The second thing I realized about learning resilience is that the most important conversation we have in life is with ourselves. That inner voice we have to pay attention to. My inner voice initially was saying, I can't do this. I'm not going to make it through. I was setting myself for failure before I even started trying. So I started paying attention to that inner voice that said, I'm going to be okay. I did not know what okay was going to be, but I just said, I'm going to be okay. Point number 3 that I learned through my path on resiliency is that our attitude is our calling card in life. We can choose our attitude like we choose our outfit every single day. So I realized that my attitude every single morning was going to say, today is going to be a great day. And that's what I was declaring every single day during those tough times. I also learned this about resiliency. The most successful people in life, no matter what they are, will tell you the number one thing, if they had to pick one thing that was key to their success, is believing in themselves. Because if we cannot believe in ourselves, why would we expect anyone else to believe in us? Very, very important. The next thing I learned on my path to resiliency is mindfulness. Mindfulness is being present in the moment we're in. And I had to practice that really hard because my brain kept wanting to go back to when Patrick was healthy. And I had to tell myself, I can't look back because I'm not going that way. The 3 favorite words I tell my kids that I love after I love you are, let it go when we can't control it. So if I wasn't living in the past and I was worrying about the future, one of the great quotes that I love from Joyce Meyer says, worrying about the future is a down payment on a problem we may never have. So why am I worrying about that, right? Being very mindful in the moment we are in. Hugely important. That's what resilient people do. The last thing resilient people do is they practice self-reflection and self-awareness. So every single day they take time to say, what can I be doing better to help achieve what I want to achieve in life? And for me, I'd written down I wanted to be the first Canadian and the first female to ever run FedEx Canada. So I was being mindful of those were my goals. And I must tell you, for those of you that don't write down goals, do it. The most successful people in life write down their goals personally and professionally. So for me, I was being mindful, being self-reflecting to say, I still want to achieve that goal. And you know what? A year after my husband passed away, in August 2009, he passed away. In August 2010, I got a call from Memphis, Tennessee. I've been with FedEx for 18 years, and they said, congratulations. And I said, for what? And they said, you're now the first Canadian, now the first female, not only to ever run FedEx, a division of FedEx Canada, but a division in the world. You know what I said? Well, aren't you going to interview me? Now, no man would ever say that. They're offering me the job. And I said, aren't you going to interview me? And it has been 8 years since I got this job. And I'm so very grateful for the opportunity to be here today to share my story. And I will end by saying 2 things. Please practice gratitude. The most successful people will also tell you, when you live a life of gratitude, focus on what you have, not what's missing, you will attract more things to be grateful for. So I'm very grateful to be here tonight to share my story, and I truly hope these tips I've shared will help you not only move the dial for you, which is very important, but help us collectively move the dial for others. Thank you very much for your time.
Wow, can I give you a hug? That was amazing. Hi, everybody. My name is Eguono. I know we're out of time, so I'm just going to run into this. November 7th, 14 years ago, I was with my family in Nigeria celebrating my birthday. So today is my birthday. Happy birthday to me. Thank you. Thank you. I remember it being such a fun time. My dad teased me saying, you mean, after all these years, you're still only 15? I'm not sure how he really wanted me to respond to that. But anyway, a day after that, we got news that my dad was accidentally shot on his way home from work. I lost my dad that day, and it was absolutely devastating for the family. You see, my dad was a family man, an engineer, our guide in everything, science, technology, engineering, and math. And he was just such a big supporter for each and every one of us. So to have lost such an important piece of my life that day was huge, and it left me feeling confused and unsure of how I would navigate life without his guidance. I definitely could not foresee that I'll be here standing in front of you today 14 years later. So fast forward 14 years, I am privileged to be a young director at a top bank in Canada. So how did I go from being a confused teenager to a confident female passionately helping a bank stay at the cutting edge of innovation? Well, first and foremost, I had God's help. I cannot say my story without acknowledging that a lot of the events in my life were orchestrated by God. On my part, I took responsibility for knowing and honing my strengths and passions, and I found mentors to help me in areas where I needed to grow. You see, growing up, I had a natural ability in math and sciences. My dad would spend hours after work teaching me, and I was usually top of my class because of the extra effort I put into something I was passionate about. One of my favorite books has a quote that says, "A person who is diligent in his ways will stand before kings and queens." And that's kind of what happened to me. My uncle took note of just how well I was doing and the potential that I had, and that prompted him to help me land a scholarship to come study in Canada. I was told that I had the brains and diligence to study medicine, but I decided to go for engineering. Why? Because I was just so fascinated by phones. I wanted to break them and fix them, figure out how to connect, and I also loved solving complex problems. So I decided to go for engineering at Mogul University. A couple years after that, I was working as a verification engineer at Ericsson, and I was asked to lead the test community. Now, I was the youngest in this community, the most inexperienced in my opinion, and it also spanned Canada, Hungary, and Sweden. So naturally, I was scared, and I wondered, why me? Well, my manager, Angie, at the time, she saw leadership potential, and she was giving me a chance to hone it, and I took that chance, even though I was really scared. After months of successfully leading the team, I thought to myself, well, that was actually fun. I should do this more, I should invest in myself here. And that's when I decided to go pursue an MBA degree at Queen's University. When I was graduating from Queen's, I was looking for a job that would allow me to continue to grow my business and leadership skills, but at the same time, I didn't want to lose touch with technology because I loved it. CIBC's TLAB program was perfect for this because it gave me a mix of both worlds, and I went for it. I took responsibility for knowing and honing my strengths and passions. When I joined CIBC's TLAB program, I was assigned a mentor. Now, I got so much out of this relationship that I went all out. I went to look for mentors in anything from technology architecture to how to be a wife, a mother, and a professional all at the same time. Mentors are really great because they really help to broaden your perspective. And you get to see life through their experiences, and that makes you make smarter decisions. They're also great because they can become your champions. And that's what happened to me. John Cowan, who was my VP mentor in innovation at CIBC, became my champion in the organization. When I was finishing up the TLAB program, I was looking for something that would give me exposure to the world of business banking. But at the same time, I always want all this, complex things. Anyway, at the same time, I wanted something in innovation where I could be building cool applications. With John's help, I was able to land a role that gave me the opportunity to explore both things. So he literally helped to create something that did not exist to help me grow. And I grew. I grew so quickly that I became a director shortly after. I must say here that it's not just about finding any mentor, but finding the right mentor and defining what you want out of those relationships. Right now, I'm on mat leave. I have a 3-month-old sweetheart who keeps me very busy and tired. I love him, I really do. But before that, I was leading the Skunkworks innovation team for about a year. Now that I'm in a position of leadership, I take it upon myself to pay forward all of the good help and support I've gotten over the years. What does that mean? It means I give my team members the space, the autonomy, the tools, the resources, and the leadership that they need to build their unique abilities. And I want to leave that charge with the business leaders, one more thing to add, that I hope you're not just about the work, but I hope you're also championing the people who are working with you. And to the young female aspirants in the room, I hope my story has inspired you to see that the future ahead of you is so bright. It's so bright that I get excited thinking about where you could be in 14 years. Think about it. I hope that you will take some time to know yourself. I hope you would invest in your strengths, hone them. I hope you'll go find mentors to help you along your journey. And finally, I hope that one day you'll be a mentor to other females yourself. Thank you. With that, I'll introduce Kris, Reyes.
So I thought about turning my speech into a song and dance just to keep your attention because I know it's been a long day, but I have no such talent. So stay with me. Maybe Jody will promise drinks afterwards. When I first heard about Jody's Move the Dial mission to create a global movement for advancing women into leadership positions using stories, I knew that I had to be a part of it. I've held a few job titles in my life. One of my favorite ones, by the way, was as a morning show host and reporter right here in Toronto. I do digital documentaries now, most recently for AJ Plus in San Francisco, but no matter where I live or what I do, the title that rings truest for me is that of a storyteller. So I'd like to do something a little different from the other speakers who have shared their own inspirational stories. I'm going to go a little meta here on you. I wanted to say a few words about something I'm really passionate about, the power of stories. A storyteller's point of view about why sharing stories, as simple as that may sound, makes such a difference. Why moving the dial, no matter the issue, really happens one story at a time. So thank you, Jody and her team, for letting me claim this space because it gives me the chance to do something that I like to do as often as possible. That is champion and cheer for a story ecosystem that is more accurate, more fair, and more nuanced, more complex, and yes, more diverse. So I wanted to say three things about the power of story that I think is important to say now more than ever. The first is an insight that was recently shared to me in a workshop on storytelling. There is nothing more powerful than a person who can embody a message. I love that term, embody a message. I love that insight because it states so very clearly that we need people to tell their own stories of their own experiences. That's when we listen the most. That's when the story is the most powerful. And frankly, that's when the story is most accurate. So for to right the many wrongs in our cities, in our homes, and our workplaces, if we are to move the dial, then we need to give space to those who are most affected by the problems, those who embody these wrongs, to tell their stories. As a journalist, I used to abide by the rule, give voice to the voiceless, but I think closer to the mark is let the voiceless speak, and let's get out of the way and listen. This is why I think forums like these are so important. And Jody, I don't know if she's in the audience or backstage, right? Why this is such a brilliant concept. As simple as it may sound, you are giving people the space to tell their own stories. There's nothing more powerful than a person who can embody a message. So the second thing is my ethos as a storyteller. Many stories matter. That line is lifted from a brilliant talk by the brilliant Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who also said that it's not that stereotypes are incorrect, it's that they're incomplete. There's a danger in reducing anyone to a single story. I think everyone in this room knows what it feels like to have to fit into that very limited narrative of what it means to be a woman, a man, a human, or a leader. Adichie said, the consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. I also think that it does something even more insidious. It gives us blind spots. If we're choosing our leaders and our CEOs based on a very limited handful of stories that are in our mind about who is capable of leading, then we might never consider Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Deb Haaland, Sharice Davids, Rashida Tlaib as someone who could run for office, who we could vote for, who could lead us. Those are, by the way, just a few of the history-making women elected to Congress last night, right? They're not here, but they deserve an applause. Anyone who has ever tried to break down a barrier, blaze a trail, or shatter a ceiling knows what it means to be reduced to a single story, to have to work so hard just to become visible for the first time. If all our leaders were story literate, if our public discourse didn't suffer from narratives that are too simplistic and told from too few perspectives, I truly believe we would be quicker to solving many of our problems today. Many stories matter. Yes, right? Many stories matter. The third and final thing is this. If we are to have powerful storytellers and many stories told, it is of equal importance that we are a responsible and engaged audience for those stories. The stories we like, the stories we share, the stories that we make popular, the stories that we give our time to are made ever powerful by our attention. And that's the thing with stories. They don't have to be true to be powerful. Isn't that scary? That's scary. That's a lesson, that's a hard knock lesson we learned in 2018. If a story is repeated enough, a woman can't be CEO, she can't code, can't lead, she doesn't look right, she doesn't look powerful, she doesn't sound authoritative, it gains a lot of momentum. Stories, by their definition, are just creations of our imaginations. It's how we arrange facts. That's why you can have the same set of facts and two completely different stories. We bring these stories to life the more we support them, the more we cheer them on, whether we realize it or not. So we need to have a critical eye and a critical ear for when a story is trying to fool us, trying to incite our anger for no reason, obscure the truth or blur accuracy, or give us those blind spots that allow us to see some people more than others. We must question narratives that deceive, and we must resist the temptation to spread stories that encourage ideas, attitudes, and behaviors that are destructive and discriminating. We must strive, all of us, to be a better audience, responsible for where we spend the ever-valuable currency that is our attention. Our appetite for complexity must increase. Stories are made powerful by their audience. So in closing, no matter what your role is in this grander goal of moving the dial, whether you're already a leader, an aspiring leader, or just trying to change your work or community culture into something more inclusive, my hope as a storyteller is that you will ask yourself these questions and challenge those around you to do the same. Am I embodying my story? Do I need to get out of the way or help someone who is trying to embody their own story? Am I exposing myself enough to enough stories, or are the narratives that define my worldview too limited, too simplistic? Am I giving enough support to stories that truly matter, to stories that are complex, to stories that truly move the dial? I know it's easy to toss those questions out there. It's kind of like, all right, you deal with it. But they're so much harder to answer, and that's why I am so hopeful for forums like this one. this is a powerful stage that allows us to move that conversation forward one story at a time. So thank you for being a part of that. Jody, thank you for letting me be a part of that. And thank you for letting me do this in front of my 9-year-old niece who's in this audience. Don't look around, I promise not to point her out. But my mom and my aunts were never in a room like this. Role models matter. Many stories matter.